How early stage ventures can get the most out of conferences. Thanks for joining us this afternoon, for taking some time out of your busy day. This webinar today is another in the series developed by BioNB. This webinar is available or accessible, of course, by anybody out there in the business community. But just a quick description of what we do here at BioNB. We're a non-for-profit non-government agency. We've been around for just over 20 years, and we're the voice of the bioscience sector in New Brunswick, and we work with researchers and entrepreneurs in developing bioscience businesses. And we're currently working with over 40 startups, and most of our startups are in the early stage phase. So that's why today's webinar is focusing on conference and trade show participation for early stage ventures. I'll talk a bit about the scope of this presentation in a moment. Again, this we're targeting toward our clients, but the content of this webinar is applicable to anybody in that's in early stage startup space. Just a quick word about me. I'm Client Services Manager here. I've got 19 years experience in marketing. I've worked in 3 startups. I teach at UNB an entrepreneurship course. And in my lives, I have been involved in conferences and trade shows at a number of different levels. I've been an attendee at large, 10,000 person conferences and 50 person tiny trade shows and motels. I've been an exhibitor and had to work the booth for 12-hour shifts, and now that I'm at BioNB, I'm actually on the other side as an organizer, helping out with our Biofinery Conference. So I've got some fair bit of experience involved in participating in conferences. Quick housekeeping. The presentation is going to last about 20 minutes. And then we'll do some Q&A, and you can submit your questions at any time using the questions tab on the webinar panel to the right. It's near the bottom. You can sit back and relax because I'm going to email out the slides, but I am asking for people to complete a survey in exchange for those slides. And the survey is really quick. It's 3 questions, of which one is your name or your email address. We just want to find out what people are interested in hearing in our webinar series. Just what topics people want to cover. We have a number of other webinars up on our website, bionb.org/webinars, and I think we have almost 10 at this point that we've posted up there, which are some pretty good topics. We usually get about 30 people to the webinar, so there's quite a fair bit of interest. So I think the topics are resonating, so it's worth checking out that page. So let's jump into the webinar today. Today's goal is to talk about why to go to trade shows and conferences, how to do them. I'm going to provide some resources and a list of bioscience conferences. And the focus again is on being an attendee versus being an exhibitor. So I'm not talking about setting up a booth and all that kind of stuff. Right now, for early stage, and this could be someone who's a researcher and they're thinking of commercializing something, or you're in the middle of going to market, but you're still at that early stage. I want to talk about what you need to do when you go to a conference and how to set a game plan and the value of conferences. So I wanted to talk really quickly just to place what I'm going to talk about today in terms of the stages of companies' development. And there's 3 general stages. There's the early stage, which we're going to talk about. That's that pre-commercialization phase, which most of our clients are in, and probably most of the listeners out there are in. There's the market entry stage where you're starting to get some sales, and then there's growth and maturity where you're everything from, you're $1 million and you're going to grow to 10 million, or you're Microsoft and you're going to conferences. So early stage, the focus for today is there's a lot of value in going to these events. Even in this day of the internet, in electronic communication, people still want to connect face-to-face, and you can learn so much because when you get 10,000 people concentrated in one spot for 2 or 3 days, there's so much information can be shared, and it can really motivate you to action. The the reasons to participate for early stage companies is to understand your industry. When I moved into a new industry, I went to a conference and just soaked up all the information. I came home with one of the conference bags full of brochures and books and information because I'm trying to understand this industry and how it worked. It's a way for you to understand who the competitors are. It's a way for you to go out and survey what other people are doing in terms of IP to see if there are people doing similar stuff to you. The problem with sometimes in the Maritimes is we are closed off to what's going on in the US and Europe and Asia, and it's good to go out and see what other people are up to. One person I work with said it's good to just go to an event, even a small one here in town, just to understand how they work. And we're not talking necessarily about academic events that researchers may have gone to, but more commercial type events, just to see how they're structured and how people work them. So it's just getting your feet wet in a lot of ways and seeing what opportunities lie in going to conferences. Customer discovery is a big one that we talk about at BioNB, and that's, you've got an idea, but you want to validate that by going and talking to people. And a really good way to find people to have those 100 interviews is at a conference, because you get those people all in one spot. So the participation level in bold there at the bottom is to walk the floor and meet people and learn. And that's what early stage you should be looking to do. When you get into market entry, you're going to be looking more at lead generation, partnerships, and of course, surveying the competition in the industry. You'll be booking meetings, you might even have a booth, and you might even be doing some presentations. In a company I work for, we spend a lot of our time doing market entry type stuff at trade shows. And I'm not going to talk about that in detail today because most of our companies aren't at that stage. They are getting there, so we'll come back to that topic in a future webinar or a presentation or some format. And quickly, when you get to the growth and maturity stage, you're doing lead generation, but a big thing is branding. And I've been to the conferences where they raffle off cars just to get the people coming to the booth and getting free stuff. And these are big companies, like I said, Microsoft and the big players. And it's really, they have the sales. They're just keeping that brand out there, but they're still making connections. And at that level, you might be doing sponsorships, and of course, booth, and by booth I mean a gigantic booth with helicopters and free cars and all that stuff. So it's a whole other world, and we're not going to get into that today, of course. So we're focusing on early stage. So why conferences in this day and age? Because personal connections matter. You can immerse yourself in an industry. You can see what everyone else is doing. You can do those customer discovery interviews, and you might even end up doing some sales. We had a client who was able to get a pilot customer from going to a conference in the last 3 or 4 months. There's an interesting article in Atlantic Business this time last year, is Patrick Keefe, who's a VC in Halifax at Build Ventures, and he was talking about the fact that in Atlantic Canada, people tend to stay close to home, and they need to get out and see what's going on outside and get into the markets. Because Atlantic Canada is such a tiny spot. It's only 2 million people. That's half the size of that's the population of the city of Toronto. It's about a third of the size of the GTA. So it's just a tiny little market. So you've got to go out and see what's going on. And to be honest with you, stuff in the States and Europe, it's a very competitive environment, and there's amazing things going on. So his argument was get out, buy a plane ticket, and go out and immerse yourself. So I think that's a really important thing for us, especially in Atlantic Canada. And when I lived in BC, it was the same thing. People tended to stay in the BC-Alberta corridor, and they were a little bit tenuous about going down to the States, but you have to get out into your markets to meet people and understand what's going on. Just some nomenclature really quick. I use trade show and conference interchangeably, but there is a difference. Trade shows tend to be commercially focused, and they're about products. And they usually have a big exhibit hall. And this is important when you're trying to decide what conference to go to, so that you understand that you're going to the right conference depending on what your goals are and what stage you're at. So trade show is a commercial, about networking and sales, where the conference, and academics are more used to the conference, or sometimes called a Congress or a convention, is a meeting for education, an exchange of information, so symposiums, that kind of stuff. It can be academic, there can be business, political, social aspects to it. And they may have a trade show component attached to it. I used to go to a special education convention every year. It's about 7,500 people, and the trade show, the exhibit component was quite a large piece of it, but it leaned toward the academic side of the industry because it was education. It was the education field. So there's lots of opportunities at conferences, and I just want to list them just so you've got some context about what's out there. So there's networking events, and it's really important. I've found since I've been getting back into this that networking has become a real formalized, important part of these events because the connections are really important because you're bringing people together from all over the world. The partnering programs, we're going to talk about that in a moment. That's a really wonderful tool. You can do exhibits. There's pitch competitions or pitch opportunities. A lot of investor symposiums that are part of conferences, or they're just that kind of conference. There's poster sessions, and I've noticed not just the academic ones, but now you see poster sessions for startups. There was just a conference in Toronto that had poster session where the discussion or the poster content was more about the business opportunity versus the science side. We would do conferences in the past where we tried to get on the a speakers panel or do a presentation. It was a really valuable tool, and a lot of conventions will let you do that. There's sponsorship opportunities. You know, you can sponsor everything from the bags that they give out all the materials in to we once sponsored a massage. A registered massage therapist came in our booth and gave massages to teachers, which was very popular, and it drew a lot of people to our booth. We also did formal receptions where we would invite people to a hospitality suite. And a big part of conferences is usually these things are downtown around in a convention center, and around that convention center are hotels and lots of bars and restaurants. And the reason for that is people meet for a dinner, for drinks, for coffee, and that's a big, big, big part of conferences. So this list is just to show you there's a lot going on at these events that give you those opportunities to push your business forward. So before the show, we're going to talk about which shows to pick in a moment, but there's some pre-planning you want to do. You want to look at the attendee list. Sometimes they provide those, where you can see who presented in the past or what kind of people. Sometimes they have statistics that you can download and see who's coming from what companies or industries. And you can review the presentation, so you could set up these networking opportunities in advance. You can use the partnering program, which I'll talk about in more detail in a moment, or you can just email or phone those people and say, hey, I'd like to meet you while you're in New York at the XYZ conference. And a great way to do that is to identify those key speakers off the website, because it's all posted and you can contact them, email, phone, LinkedIn. I mentioned here to book early, and the reason for that is because it's cheaper sometimes to book. You get the early bird. You also get the cheaper flights and the hotel rooms before they book up. Usually the hotel rooms book up faster because the hotels are open to people not just going to your conference. The caveat I put the star there is just to, if you're not 100% sure about your attendance, try to book as late as possible, because usually you cannot get a refund. Usually it's something like you can get 50% back 30 days before or something like that. So, and some of these passes are significant in price. They range, from $500 to, we've seen $3,000 conference passes. So you just have to decide based on your circumstances about when to book. But generally you want to book it earlier than later, especially if there's certain sessions that you want to go to or networking events that fill up. So during the show, you need to work it, and I remember conferences were never fun. They weren't an exciting time to go to Seattle or New York or Boston because you didn't really get to see the city. You were up at the crack of dawn, and you were in the convention hall talking to people all day, and then you were out at events or at dinner, and it was nonstop, and it was exhausting. It was fun, but and exciting, but it wasn't a vacation. You want to take advantage of the networking sessions, even if you're shy. Too bad. You've got to take advantage of this to make it worth your while. And the nice thing is that they're setting up more and more of these partnering programs that help you do this instead of you just walking up to people, which was just challenging for most people. There's tools in place, and we'll talk about those. And take advantage of the dinner and drinks to take people out. I had a boss. He would go around and he would meet. By the end of the day, he had 6 people that we were going to take out to dinner that he had collected, and he took us to a nice restaurant, and we had a great time and nice wine and all that. But he was really big on getting a bunch, and these were potential customers. This wasn't just your pals. These were people that he wanted to make a connection with. It's important to eat and sleep well and to not drink too much. It's a real possibility that drags you down. So I really started to drink coffee when I was doing the conference circuit. It's your job, not a vacation, and I just want to tell this story. When I went to a conference, I think it was in Louisville or Ohio or somewhere in the States, and across from our booth there were these government tables for agencies, U.S. government agencies, not to single anybody out in the government, but the people came on setup day and they put out all their brochures and they left, and they never came back until breakdown 3 days later. And when my colleague asked them, and they said they'd just been touring around the city all day. And we also noticed that some people, they took their brochures and they were throwing them in the garbage, and they kept a few. And the point of that was that they wanted to show they wanted to come back with less brochures to show that they'd actually handed out stuff. So you don't want to do that because you're spending a lot of money, and that's typically not what business people do, because you're spending a fair bit of your time and resources to go to these. Another point is when you're looking at conferences, the small ones, the 50-person conference can be just as effective as the big, huge 10,000 person conference, or more so. So size doesn't matter so much as the quality of the people, if it's the right audience and the right conference for you. So the partnering programs are often called one-on-one. And a lot of the conferences are doing this now. We're doing this at our Biofinery Conference, and it's a really useful tool. It allows you to book meetings on the internet before you attend and during the conference. And it's open to, you can sign up as someone who is open to meeting people. And then it's kind of an exchange, a clearinghouse, so that you can meet customers, consultants, partners, employees, investors. And this picture here on the right side is a picture I took on my phone when I was in Toronto 2 weeks ago at the Mars Resi conference. And that's the partnering room. And those are the tables. And those people had set up those meetings. And I looked at a meeting with, wanted to meet a lawyer on intellectual property from one of the firms in Toronto. And was able to connect to them really easily and just have a nice sit-down conversation. So it's a really easy way to meet people and set up those conversations. And it's very efficient. And this one ran all day, so the talks were going on, all the sessions were going on, but this was happening. They also do, and we're big on it, our conferences, is having those breaks, longer breaks, so that people can mingle and talk. It's really powerful, and I'm not a big networker. I don't like the person who's wandering around the room, but you really do get to meet people. It's not that challenging once you start talking to people. You can learn a lot, and that's real value from the conference, is that networking piece. And I have an article there from HBR that can help, and that was written by a professor at Berkeley, I think, who defines herself as an introvert, but she's a conference person. So after the show, I always said that 50% of your work is done after the show. A lot of people think, well, now the show's done, I'm finished, it's over. The picture there, the guy on the plane, is what we used to do. Cynthia and I we used to go to a lot of conferences together, and we'd sit on the plane and go through our lead cards and qualify our leads while we were flying back to Fredericton. And we got running quickly on that Monday by doing our follow-ups with people and our game plan. So it's really important. It's amazing whenever I've gone to a conference as attendee how few people who said they were going to call or had expressed some interest in something, they never called. But the people who did, they called really early and they were right on the ball. So it's really important that week you're back to have a plan and to execute it, because you're just wasting your time and your money if you're not following up, because like I said, the stuff that happens is after the show. The show is just a platform to get you to the next step, and it's up to you to push it forward. Now, I want to talk about, because our clients are often have it's innovative ideas and there's intellectual property considerations. Going to a conference before you have IP in place, protection in place, can be an issue if you're disclosing, for example, in a poster session. That picture there is a poster session at a big conference, or doing a presentation or talking about a paper, or even having discussions with people. So you have to be very careful about that. So you need to talk to your lawyer, and I mean an IP lawyer, not your general lawyer, but someone versed in this stuff. You can also talk to your tech transfer office, Springboard or Office Research Services at UNB, for example. You can also reach out to us. We're not going to advise you, but we can connect you with people who can. But this is really important, particularly for certain patents in certain areas. When I was in Toronto, I went to a talk about this, and it is an issue. If you do disclose, you can lose control of your ability to put protection in place, for example, patent. So it's something to consider when you're in this early stage. And any questions about that, of course, is a case-by-case basis. So please reach out to your lawyer or us here at BioNB if you're in our space. So paying for it, I always say to people it's an investment, not an expense. And people tend to avoid going to conferences because it costs a lot of money, and it does, but you have to spend this money at some point. You'll get a lot of return on investment if you A, pick the right conference, and B, work the conference really well and follow up. But you can save money. There's typically a conference hotel, which is a nice hotel, and there's a little bit of a discount, but they tend to be expensive. Airbnb is an option, and interestingly enough, Airbnb was the idea came from some guys who wanted to rent out their beds in their apartment for a convention in San Francisco. There's also the hostel and the YMCA. We had some clients who drove to a conference instead of flying because they didn't have the money, and they took turns sleeping and driving, and they were able to save money that way. Now, part of it is you want to arrive rested and ready and showered, so you have to balance that. One conference we went to, we decided we'd save the company some money, and we got a hotel that ended up being about an hour's cab ride outside of Boston, and we spent 3 or 4 hours a day waiting for a cab and standing in the cab queue. So it ended up costing us more cash for the cabs and a ton of time and frustration just to save a little bit of money. So I swore we'd always go to the conference hotel in the future. Now, we had a budget, of course, but when you're starting out, you often don't. So personal funds, you may need to use them. You may need to put some more equity into the business. I mean, if you're starting a business, you have to do that. Credit cards, personal credit cards and lines of credit are there available. Your FFF, family, friends, and fans. So you've got to, this is a business, so you have to work the angles and try and find the money somehow. And keep track of the cost so you can get it reimbursed from the company. If a company gets investment in the future, I did this when I spent about $5,000 in a startup, and I just kept all the receipts in an envelope, and I got it all back from the company. Now, people always ask if there's government funding out there, and I'm going to say there really isn't. Let's just assume that there isn't. Opportunities New Brunswick has done some stuff, but it just depends on what your stage you're at. And when they have, it's 50% reimbursement. So you still have to have half the money, and they only reimburse after the fact. So you've got to have access to the cash in the first place. So you're not going to get 100%. The government is not just going to give you money to go to trade show or a conference. It's not going to happen. Can export is one if you're doing exporting into other markets. Again, this is a possibility. It just depends on your company, your product, the stage you're at. There's all kinds of qualifications, so I don't want anybody's hopes to get raised. So there are some opportunities out there, but I would suggest that you consider the fact that, or assume that you're going to have to pay for this yourself. And it's just a cost of doing business. Department of Agriculture, Aquaculture and Fisheries here in New Brunswick has the market readiness program if you're in the ag space, and that's something to look into. So there are possibilities, but don't count on it. That said, this money is well spent, and it's worth trying to find it. Like I said, it's an investment, not an expense. As long as you don't go and just attend the talks and then go home back to the hotel and watch movies, it's you've got to work at that whole time that you're there to get that full return on investment. This is a list, and when I send the slides, you'll have a link to them. This is for bio companies, and there's lots of them, and they're all over, and they're various sizes and costs involved. And we have a list, and if you're a client or you're in this bioscience space, we can meet with you, discuss with you conferences that fit where you're at. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some highlights of things that are coming up this spring and fall in North America. And we work with clients in all kinds of sectors. So there's pharma, there's agriculture, med tech. There's the animal health one in Charlottetown, which is it's a small event, but it gets some really big players. So if you're in animal health, it's a great conference and a great venue. And I want to talk about, of course, our conference in June is the Biofinery Conference, and some of you may have attended in the past. This is the 5th one. And it is a really well-run conference. It's small in that it's 150 people, but the quality of the speakers and the organization and the networking opportunities, it's a real model for other conferences. And it really is about developing the bioenergy space, and it's been very successful. It's grown really fast, and people really enjoy coming. And if you're not in this space, it's not super expensive, and it's just a way to get your feet wet in terms of attending a conference and trying out the partnering. We have a partnering program. There's networking opportunities and social events. So it's really a good model for how a good conference is run. So it's worth checking out, especially if you're in that space of biofuels, bioenergy, biorefining, to come and learn what's going on in the field. So we can help our clients, and if you're not a client, please reach out to ask us about how we may be able to help. We do have lists and lists, and we know the conferences that are out there in our space worldwide. And we may be able to help make connections to people that are at those conferences if they're in our database or we know of them. We also do pitch coaching for clients who are going to investor forums. We've got an investor forum in Toronto in May that we've got a client going to that we've helped with pitch. And a lot of conferences are doing the pitch sessions. The Vet Health one in Charlottetown is doing the same. So there are always these opportunities to go. And the idea with the pitch is to get money for your business. And I think most of our staff have been to most of these conferences, a lot of these conferences, particularly in Canada. And I've been sending out information about some funding and partnership opportunities for certain conferences. So if you've received those in your email, please follow up if you're interested, because that assistance can be really valuable helping you navigate a conference. We can also provide just general advice and help with the game plan to really work the conference. So if you have any questions, you can contact me at the information listed on the screen. And I'm going to send out the the survey on webinar topics. And it's 3 really quick questions. It's not a long survey. Just want to get a sense of what people are looking for. So if there are any questions, and a couple have come in, I'm just going to see if I can show the question screen here. Okay, so if you have any questions, just type them into the box there on the right. So question was, how many conferences should I attend in a year? I don't know the answer to that question necessarily. It depends on what your goals are, what your budget is. I would say that find a really good conference that really fits what you're trying to do in the stage you're at, and just work it really well. You don't have to go and spend a fortune. When one of the startups I was in, we ended up having 20 conferences a year we attended. They're all different sizes, and they often has to have one person go to. But we were in market, and we were really trying to drive sales. When we started out, we'd do 1, maybe 2 conferences because we didn't have the money. So it was really important to be selective and find the best ones. And like I said, it's not necessarily the big ones or the expensive ones. You can get a lot of value out of small ones where you can meet a lot of people. Should I bring brochures about my startup and technology? Depends on what stage you're at. Yeah, often people like to see things, but I think getting a business card printed up at Staples or Vistaprint or even at home, you can buy those packages of business card, perforated business cards. Just to have those with your contact information would be very useful. And again, those IP considerations, you want to be careful about giving too much information if that's going to be an issue. It just depends what stage you're at. If you get into when you're doing a booth, you definitely want to get into having that material designed and written. And kind of related question, somebody asked if you should bring and give out promo items. And I'd say for early stage, no. That's more if you get a booth. You have the pens or the tchotchkes that you give out that people love. People love that stuff. And I always pick up stuff for my kids. Like they always have toys for parents, I guess, to give to their kids to take home that are branded. The sponsorship bags, you have to be careful about that. That can be expensive, and if you're starting out, you don't want to get into too much branding because it's kind of a waste of money because you want to spend that on sales generation. Then branding is something you do later after you've built that, that brand in the marketplace. You just want to maintain it. So the bags, and I did that and learned it's a little bit expensive for an early stage company to do. Not as much ROI as spending that money on taking a select group of people out to dinner or going and meeting them after the conference. So you could spend your dollars further. So that's looks like that's all our questions for today. And again, if you have any questions after that pop into your head, just give me a call or send me an email, and you'll be receiving an email probably this afternoon or very early in the morning with the survey. And I want to thank everybody for spending some time this afternoon to learn about this topic, and wish you best of luck if you're going to be attending a conference or trade show in the future. Thanks so much.